Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Everybody's mic's on. Pull one out the room here. We are missing one member tonight, but he is on his way, but we still have a quorum established. Would y'all please stand for the invocation and pledge of allegiance? Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds of community. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we make decisions that affect your people. Continue to remind us that what we all do here today and all that we accomplish is for the pursuit for truth and great glory of you. For the service of Green Valley Special Utility District and its ratepayers. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. First, let me thank everybody that's here tonight. I look forward to, if I haven't shaken your hand and say hello, I apologize. I'll try and do that at some point in time this evening. At this point, we're going to move to item C. GVSUD welcomes public participation. If you're unable to attend the meeting, a written comment can be emailed or delivered to GVSUD's Public Information Officer with your name and the topic or agenda item that you wish to address to Tracy Ratmund at gvsud.org or delivered to the district's office located here. Written comments must be submitted and received no later than 3 p.m. on July 12, 2023. Please remember the public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Time may not be shared or ceded to another citizen. We have two citizens wishing to speak to us tonight. The first, Ms. Roxanne Rayner. Ma'am? Does she have a microphone?
Yes. We can just turn on.
Hello, board. Well, that's time again. Your favorite increase discussion. I think we all acknowledge that inflation is affecting everyone, including utility companies. With the scarcity of water, the cost to procure this has increased as well. With that being said, I think it's hard to ignore GVUSD's relationship with money has historically been similar to that of the federal government. Debt to income ratio is really unbalanced looking around. And additionally, it looks like your reserves are probably likely dipping. And who shoulders the brunt of those decisions that led us here? Those of us in Champaign trying to feed our family. With rate increases consistent the last several years that I've been ratepayer at least, and projections of rate increases likely to be required over the next 5 to 6 years and beyond, this isn't looking good for us ratepayers. Keep in mind, if you increase the rates of 3 to 5% over 8 years, that compounds. And what might seem like a marginal increase annually is actually significant over time. I would urge the board to take the time to work with the GM and the staff to reel in any excessive spending going forward, limit the budget and operational costs, and look at this with a fine tooth comb and find any creative ways to allocate the required money to your reserves in order to maintain a worthy credit rating without a significant rate increase to us ratepayers. This is what households you service are doing in this economic climate, and this should be expected of you as well. In closing, any increase should be minimal, only to cover inflation and not to make up revenue for all past excessive spending, which is what an over 5% rate increase in the next several years looks like to me. Going forward, remember, you guys create your own inflation that's handed down to ratepayers with spending runs rampant and unfettered. One more item. I just want to make clear my thoughts on this. Any discussion on increasing water rates to cover wastewater operations, whether that's direct infrastructure or otherwise, is completely unscrupulous. I pay a hefty fee to my wastewater provider, which is not GPOCD. I should not be expected to also dig out of my pockets to cover your wastewater customers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Carol Latimer.
Good evening, board members. I would like to echo everything she said, so I'm going to kind of leave it in that regard. One of the reasons I'm before you today is before October of last year, it sent over to GDS requesting that I received the form for ag water rates. I am going to send another email to them tomorrow. I apologize.
Judy's on the line. Says she can't understand a thing.
Them to evaluate the water ag rates, because a 3 to 5% increase on my water bill is staggeringly substantial, because I'm watering sheep, chickens, and other livestock. So the other thing that I would like to suggest is that if you do need to cover these costs, that perhaps this board could be driven enough to take those rate increases and put them where the debt burden is due. In other words, in the new subdivisions, the rate increase for water could be more substantial there because you're also having to pay the sewer. Instead of putting all of that increase back on the existing water company customers, I think that's a fair way to look at the infrastructure for the people. The second thing is, if you are going to increase the rate for water-only clients, water-only persons, that you earmark that money not to fund these developments that are going out into these new communities where you should have impact fees and the other ways of funding them, but for CIP to improve the fire service lines that are in there, and update and keep in our areas where we have been our equipment up to date. I noticed that there was some improvement made on Tolly Road. The Cibolo Tolly Road off of Tolly Road had a fire hydrant and then 2 black ones. The neighbor's home burned down. Now there's 2 good fire hydrants, one at the end of Tolly Road and Cibolo Tolly Road, and one at the end of the cul-de-sac. But the guy in the middle is still the little guy. Still the black and fire hydrant. So I would like to know, how is the guy at the top of the hill a viable fire hydrant? So those are some of the questions that I have about the fire service. And then please, if you do increase our rates, because you have to cover the business decision to spend millions of dollars on a sewage treatment plant, maybe you could turn around and give that same pay cut percentage rate to the executives that chose to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. Any other, did we miss any names? Did we miss anybody? All right, moving on. Item D, your presentation from New Gen Strategies and Solutions regarding the 5-year rate analysis for water and wastewater, and take action as necessary. Mr. Allen, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Just as you said, Chris Eckert and Megan Kirkland from New Gen Strategies are here with us tonight to go over the rate study that we presented a few weeks ago, and maybe some additions to that. So I'm going to turn this over to them and then walk us through that script, that PowerPoint. I believe we are making copies for those of y'all in the audience. We all have Samantha is working on that as we speak, so she should be here shortly with that.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. Chris Eckert with New Gen Strategies and Solutions. Pleasure to be with you this evening. And I do have Megan Kirkland with me tonight, also with New Gen. Happy to be with you again in person this time. To walk through some of this information, try to answer some of your questions as we go through this. We did work with your staff. We added some information to the presentation since last time. We'll be walking through that this evening. I will do my best to answer questions for you. If I can't answer those questions for you tonight, we're happy to go back, develop more information, bring that back to you as we go through this tonight. With that, I believe we're going to have the presentation up here in just a second. If we can go ahead and move on to slide 2. One thing I wanted to start with tonight, this is a slide I've used with a number of councils, a number of boards throughout the state. I keep getting asked, what's going on in the nation? What's going on in the industry? The best way we have to track that is through a national index that's published by the St. Louis Federal Reserve. And there's 3 different indices here on this chart. The red line, that's basically inflation. That's consumer price index. And we've tracked that all the way back to 1997. And you can see over time, that's been running about 2.5%. Obviously, that has spiked recently. This chart only goes through 2022. We're still waiting on the data to get to 2023 to catch up there. We anticipate that's going to tick up again because we have seen significant increases in inflation in recent months. On the green line, that's median household income. That's what we've seen in terms of a change in median household income. From 1997 through 2021, in this case, that's been running about 2.7% increase. The blue line, that is a water, sewer, and trash CPI. So what that is, it's the Federal Reserve tracking the average cost of water, sewer, and trash services, basically utility services around the nation. That's not broken out between water, sewer, or trash. It's an aggregate indice that we look at that the Fed is tracking. As we look at that, you see that started climbing around 2003. And ultimately, that's been running at about 4.2%. Again, that's over the entire nation. But it's been running about 4.2% per year. That's been running ahead of increases in median household income. It's been running ahead of inflation. And so we've seen that for some years. What's driving this? Ultimately, there are several things driving this, mainly capital. It's capital increases, it's regulatory requirements. We also, when we look at utility service in general, many utilities throughout the country have not kept up. They simply have not kept up with rising costs. They have not kept up with capital demands. They have not kept up with operations and maintenance expenses. And in some ways, we are paying consistent tax as an industry. And you'll see this all over the country. At the same time, we see increasing regulatory requirements. You've probably seen the lead and copper rules that come out. You've seen the PFAS rules that are being debated. So again, this is just going to become more expensive, and it's a reality of being in the water and sewer business. We can absolutely be efficient with our costs. We can cut costs where we need to. That's absolutely part of it. But at the same time, we do have to meet regulatory requirements. We don't have a choice in that. Those requirements come from the EPA. They come from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. So some of these things are outside of our authority. And that's one of the things we have to recognize within our business. Any questions on that front?
Real quick, the CPI for water and sewer, that's the national average. In relation to GPSUD, how are we trending? Are we trending above or below that national average?
You did not have a rate increase in 2023, so I'll tell you that you're trending below that average this year. I've not gone back to look historically where you are, so we can certainly go back and look at that and add that to this line.
From what you've seen from other utilities, how many have not had a rate increase in the, you said that we didn't have one last year, so I was trying to. Is it common not to have an increase?
So it's always my recommendation that you have small increases every year, particularly when you have a significant component of your budget that is water purchases or something like that, where it comes from another entity. If you plan well, you could do increases every other year, but often that's going to mean those every other year increases are important. Every business is different, every entity is different, they make different decisions. I had one client this last year, they've gone 13 years without an increase. I stood in front of their council, and it was a hefty increase they needed because they had not raised rates. So unfortunately, I don't have a percentage that I can give you. It really varies across the board. But to me, as I look at rate management, I would recommend you make small increases more frequent. I think that's a little easier to plan for. Some, as you look at it, instead of coming in with a 30% increase or a 50% increase, something of that magnitude. Which again, that's not unheard of. I did have a client, it was actually a private client, within 2 years ago, they had a 100% rate increase. That's thinking, that's where they were at because they had not taken action. That's why you're going to see, we'll talk about this tonight. To me, looking at rates is an every year act. It's something that you do every year in plan.
So my next question real quick, in relation to saws, I've heard, I don't know this for a fact, but they are cutting their rates lower.
Mr. Mayor, can we hold on to this until we get through the majority of this presentation? Please, that's an important question. But we need to see how the rest of the report goes.
I agree.
Okay.
In relation to that, is that attributed to years upon years of substantial increases done to where they didn't budget correctly and now they're having to backtrack? Would you say that that would be the case, or are there other variables within that we don't experience? Just real quick, fast, and then I'll speak that.
And unfortunately, I can't speak to saw situation. I'm not familiar with that. There could be, again, there could be any number of reasons. It could be that falling off. It could be you have cost structure change. There's any reasons why that would happen. Also, while it may look like a rate decrease, you can also have a rate structure change where you're going down on one class of customer and going up on another class of customer. So it's hard to go in and pinpoint why you're seeing what you're seeing with saws without looking at the total picture and having more information.
Thank you. I apologize, Mr. Priest. I meant no offense. I really wanted to focus on getting through this. Sorry, please continue.
No, and again, if you would rather make this a discussion, I'm more than happy to do that. It's completely with your pleasure how this goes. I do want to be responsive to the questions the board has. So I will continue and you let me know.
Will do. Thank you. I don't want to stop any board member from asking any questions, please, as it pertains to the information in front of you. If you've got more detailed questions about a different matter than what's being presented, maybe we can save those to the end.
I'll wait.
This is my shot.
Moving on to slide 3 here. Again, you've seen this before. We're here to discuss the update that we have done to the rate study. The last time we were with you was winter 2022. No rate action has been taken since that time. And again, we're presenting a 5-year plan. This plan is based on assumptions. It's based on estimates of what will happen. I believe I may have said this to the board last time. You know, there are things that have happened that I did not foresee. I did not foresee a global pandemic. I did not foresee 9% inflation. Some of these things that we have experienced recently, these are one-time events, but they have impacted our business. They've impacted everybody's business. So that's why, as we look at the rate study this year, we're only recommending rate action for 24, fiscal year 24. Not going beyond that. This is providing you a future look, an estimated future look of what the future might look like. But you have to keep looking at this. You have to keep looking at rates as part of your annual budgeting process. Just as every commercial business looks at their pricing all the time, you should be doing the same thing. That's part of just good utility management, is looking at rates and looking at it. All right. On slide 4, if we can, again, what we're doing here is we're comparing the current growth projection with our prior growth projection. Looking back at what we were assuming in 2022, what we are seeing now. Water is basically on point where we're at. I'm running a little bit ahead. Wastewater's running behind. We anticipated we would have more wastewater customers on the system now than what we do. You can see there's a big jump there in 2024. We anticipate that happening. Will that happen? It's an estimate. It's an assumption. If that changes, the numbers change. So everything beyond here, everything 25 and beyond is an assumption. It's based on what we know today. Moving on to slide 5, if you can. This is the capital improvement plan. This is what was provided to us as we developed the study. So 58, almost $59 million in capital improvements. You can see what those are on the screen. For right now, within the study, we have assumed that the district would need to issue debt to fund these projects. We've assumed that debt will be issued in fiscal year 25, with the first payment coming online in fiscal year 26. Will that happen? This is our best guess right now. It could be that the district is in a position that it only needs half of those improvements in fiscal year 25. It could change. It all depends on growth. It depends on where your service demands are at the time. But this is the assumption we made specific to the study. If the board disagrees with this assumption, we can change the assumption. Yes, sir.
How did you get these numbers?
These numbers were provided through your engineer, through your staff.
Very glad to verify this information. That's correct. Okay. Real quick, just simple. On the 1.25 plan expansion, how do we come up with 45,000? 45 million, sorry. I'll take the truck.
If only it was that.
Yeah, we were just saying.
So just real quick, that's
That is from the very engineer. And we're going in the very specific line, but never defined.
okay. So that calculation is based on current rates, current averages, and then we're trying to multiplying it to that level of containment.
But just want to make sure that, but also what Chris said about timing. Timing is everything in our business. And we're assuming these projects will continue moving forward. That may be adjusted because there's a certain percentage requirement that we have for TCEQ or capacity requirements of sewer plants. So if that growth comes in like we are expecting it to, then this timeline could change one way or the other. Or as development approaches us, and Gary and I have worked on that pretty much every other day, change that timeline, that master planning that we do. So there again, I want to put an exclamation point on what Chris said, that this timeline can change. This is a projection. Doesn't mean we're going to do these things on this timeline, but these are things on our forecast that we feel we're looking to be sure it's going to happen. We just don't know the timeline.
But the projection is for them to occur in 2025.
25. From all indications we're seeing here recently, there's been a little slowdown of growth. I mean, we were starting to see an uptick of that. In fact, this last week, we received $1.2 million worth of kayak fees, which attributes to which kayak fees contribution to the construction on the sewer side. So those revenues that you'll see in this next month's board report will reflect that uptick of revenues received from development. In other words, it's not on the backs of the ratepayers, but more so on the backs of the government.
And I do have one question. I was the one last time asking all the questions, so. Put an absolute face to their voice. With the kayak discussion, is it typical with your other clients to have a kayak versus an impact fee? How do you typically see that?
It depends. Again, you're a district, you're in the city. So I have some districts that do have both. They have a contribution to data construction, they have an impact. One caution to you is you can't double recover. You cannot be recovering money in an impact fee that you're also then recovering in a contribution. But it's my opinion, and again, I'm not even speaking on behalf of the here. I'm speaking on behalf of Chris Ayers. Growth should help pay for growth. I firmly believe that. Now, that being said, when you look at impact fees are governed by Chapter 395 of the Local Government Code. We have to be very careful when we develop impact fees because as you follow the code, you can't put 100% of your capital needs in the impact fee. You're limited to 10 years in the impact fee. And also you have to recognize a credit for future utility revenues, or you have to basically cut the fee in half. You got to do one of those two things. And so when you look at impact fees, that's a tool in the toolbox. That's not going to give you all the dollars 100% to cover growth. The way the legislation was written, the way the law is written tells us it's not going to get us 100% of what we need. So that's an issue with impact.
Okay, and then on these 59 million worth of projects, are these being paid out of IAP or are these additional debt?
So the assumption is you're going to have to issue debt and bring that in, and then you're going to repay that debt with impact fees or kayak fees to the extent you can. To the extent legally you can do that, then yes, you will. So just going back, I'm looking at the water fund, for example, and we have projected debt service in 2026 of $3.5 million. And I'm assuming that we're going to fund $2 million of that principal and interest with impact. When I look at your wastewater side, on the wastewater side for 20, and again, I'm just looking here at 25 and also looking beyond, even looking at 26, with that new debt, I'm assuming 100% of the wastewater debt is funded with either wastewater impact fees or wastewater contributions. So we have gone in and tried to offset where we legally can as much of those debt service payments with impact fees or kayak.
And so two things from your statement. So we got the impact fee for water, we got kayak fee for wastewater.
Yes.
And kayak fees are paid when a new development comes in, whenever a new development comes in. So we're estimating that all of our wastewater debt by 26, is that what you said?
So no, right now, I have in 24, I have all of your existing wastewater debt being paid with kayak fees. Same thing in 25, in 26, 27, we do not have enough kayak fees to pay all of our debt anticipated in 2027. So for the next several years, I'm fully offset. Yes, sir.
But one thing about that, Chris, is that at any point in any year, another development can come in and take care of that deficit.
Yes, sir.
The economic development of different cities that we support and we serve, we work for all 33 of those, and they're constantly looking at the I-10 corridor, I-35 corridor. And so there again, this is a shot in the dark right now. And so 27, this is going to change by then, I guarantee. And what I mean by that, just last year, we looked at over 35 new subdivisions coming into Green Valley service area. And that includes New Braunfels, Seguin, Schertz, Cibolo. So these projections change all the time. And just this past fiscal year of 2023, at this point now, we've collected $3.3 million for the kayak fees. And the difference, my understanding, the difference between kayak and impact fees is not as restricted as impact fees. Impact fees are just for certain items that we can pay for. Kayak fees, we can pay for O&M, we can pay for construction, pipeline. If I'm inaccurate on that, y'all correct me, but I believe that's why we chose to go to a kayak fee instead of a sewer impact fee. Now, in years coming, as we get more set in our wastewater customers and our growth of our wastewater system, which is ongoing, we may decide to develop an impact fee for wastewater. Right now, we chose the kayak fee because we have more flexibility. And that also was connected to growth, paying for growth. Many years ago, I can't tell you the year, it's been 2005, 2006, the board of directors of Green Valley decided, okay, we need to develop a rate plan where growth pays for growth. So that developed that impact fee, that developed that water acquisition fee. One thing different between us and some of the entities around us, we charge that to development. They pay for that water acquisition fee at plan approval. So before they start construction, they have to pay that water acquisition fee, which helps pay that water debt down. Whereas some of the other entities around us, charge that water acquisition fee per customer per month on their monthly water bill. We don't do that. We charge that to development instead of our customers. So I'm probably going all the way around.
No, it's.
Well, there's some different things between Green Valley Sub
Yes.
and some of the entities around us, and that's very important to understand. When we do a rate increase like that, we're looking at our customers, but there's other fees that are being paid by other people other than our customers. That's one reason why, even though we get our increases every year from CRWA, GRA, and then every aquifer fees go up occasionally, we're able to control that to a degree because we're more diverse. Yet we have less income streams or revenue streams than some of the cities and entities around. There is a difference.
I think that was helping to establish a baseline of what you guys experience for the people who don't. And I appreciate you going deeper that way. I know it's long, but
I usually talk to,
I do too. So a little bit last question, as far as the fiscal year, 25 and 26 and this calculation on factored in, increases of interest rates and everything, projected to be in that time frame. And obviously economic growth, financial, okay. So that number can change, obviously.
It will change.
But on the either lesser or greater by how much of a percentage? 5%, 10%? What are we thinking, Delta?
I'm hoping it's not going to swing that much, but it's possible it could. It's absolutely possible. It could go down 5%.
But we're thinking in that range. Okay.
One thing I do want to talk about just with debt right quick. I recognize that's four-letter words. I have a number of clients that do not like debt because of the interest charges that come along with it. I understand that. But one thing I want you to think about relative to a utility. A utility is a long-term business, and you are putting in expensive items. You are putting in a $25 million price. It's hard to pay for that with cash. It's hard to generate cash and pay for that. What we see when we use debt in a utility context is we are spreading out repayment of that plant asset over the life of the asset, over the people that are using the asset. If you go in today and use $45 million in cash to fund that plant, you got a ratepayer today, they're generating that cash, and then they move out 6 months from now. They've now paid for a plant that they are never going to use. That creates what we refer to as intergenerational inequity, when you're using cash instead of debt in these cases. Now, I recognize it's more expensive because we do have interest costs, but that is one reason to potentially use debt, to make it more equitable. Those that are using the asset are paying the asset.
So someone that's not using the asset should not pay.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. All right, moving on to slide 6. This is the water fund summary where we're at right now. Again, I told you this before, for a business to be successful, revenues must match or exceed expenses. We have to be able to pay our debt. We have to plan for a rainy day. We have to reinvest in our system. And so the two graphs you see here, on the left-hand side, that's just revenue sufficiency. The bars there are our expenses, the line is our revenue. The bar falls below the line, our revenue is insufficient. So right now, you see we're rocking along pretty well there. Our expenses on the water side here for 24, our expenses are slightly lower than our revenues. Now, let me talk about what goes into that number. There's some assumptions that go into that number. The district does not budget its operating personnel between water and wastewater. When I get the budget, I get operating personnel. I get salaries and wages. So I have to go through and allocate that expense between water and wastewater. How do I do that? I use an industry standard methodology. I go through and I look at those expenses that I can specifically identify to water and sewer. So your water purchases from Canyon Regional Water, that's a water expense. Anything that is specific to wastewater goes to wastewater. When I do that allocation, 61% of your personnel expense and all the related expense with personnel falls to water. 61%. 39% falls to wastewater. However, when I look at your customer base, 3% of your customer base is wastewater. The rest, well over 90%, is water. So one of the things you have to recognize when you're looking at this chart and looking at how we allocate expenses between water and wastewater, I'm doing this based on an allocation factor. Is that representative? Is that accurate? The district can certainly go through a time study. You can sit there and have all of your employees sit there and monitor day in and day out. Do they spend time on water or wastewater every 15-minute interval? Write it down. What did you do? And we could come in and actually find out that that allocation factor is incorrect. It could be shifted too heavily to wastewater. We don't know. Again, I'm using an allocation factor here. So we need to be careful. To your comment earlier, should water pay for water and should wastewater pay for wastewater? Ideally, yes. Ideally, yes. But as I look at these numbers, I have gone through an allocation factor to do this process. This is a desktop exercise. So can I sit here today and tell you that 61% of your operating expenses, personnel operating expenses, are water versus wastewater? That's an allocation factor. That is an assumption that I've used here.
So when you're making your assumption, do you take into account water operators have to have a water license, wastewater operators have to have a wastewater?
Yes, sir. But you also have crews that are interchangeable and work on different things. You may have a day where everybody's on water. You may have a day that everybody's on wastewater.
But we have to have a license for it.
And you have some that are probably licensed to do both. Yes, sir.
I think that's a good piece of data to have when we're, because just your numbers are stating, 61% of labor is water, it's 97% of the customer base. 39% of labor is wastewater, it's 3% of the that does seem disproportionate.
Okay.
But coming to that point, we have to understand as a business, we are about to be entering where that 3% can turn into a 20% in 1-2 years. So that's something to also be mindful of.
And a good sign of that is, like I just mentioned a while ago about the kayak fees that were paid, that's for 2 units. That means that construction will start on the wastewater and the water side. So probably 3 to 6 months from now, they'll start going vertical these loans, we can reset. And then that changes that number of sewer customers at the same time water customers. So like I was saying, we see this the downturn of the development. However, it's starting to show signs of going right back. Not what it was a year ago.
2020. Right. But to your point, within 1 year of what our current contractual base is right now, that 3%, Gary, what are you thinking next year, this time when we do this again? Are we expecting to see like 10 on that number, or are we expecting to see something different based on how many EDUs are scheduled between now and then?
I think if you go back to the slide, you go to the population.
Right. That's our projection for the next several years, based on what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years.
So it is growing faster.
What, and the benefit of that, and
the delta is faster on that block versus the water increase.
you have to remember, in 2.5 years' time, we built wastewater infrastructure, a new plant that's online, been online for over a year now, plus 9 miles of collection system. And when you go out and get a permit for wastewater, you have to have a location where that permit can be tied to. Just so happened, first customer, of course, was AW Texas. However, the next customers came to us were 9 miles away. So instead of having several different lift stations throughout our system, our package plants throughout our system, we chose as a board, as a group, as an entity, to take bite the big bullet, building a package plant and 8 miles or 9 miles of infrastructure to collect throughout a larger area, which also opens up the area of growth more potential for that growth and more financial stability on the wastewater side. That's what we chose to do. And right now we have, 4 subdivisions building on the Green Valley Road side that are now connected. We're going to be connected to that 8 miles of infrastructure. And we'll start seeing that customer base increase over the next several years. So the planning that we did 2 years ago is paying it off, and we'll start seeing an uptick of that, I think, within the next 2 or 3 years.
Will the labor remain 61 and 39, or will the labor increase on the wastewater side? We're seeing more customer base.
With the growth that we have, the amount of pipeline we have in the ground throughout our system, that labor portion can grow, needs to grow.
That's what the pay for, so you're spreading that cost over.
Exactly.
My point is, while a revenue to pay for that side of road, I agree that we're growing, so will our expenses, so we're still gonna have what I see just based on what we're stated is disproportionate. And I want to figure out a way to get that closer faster. So obviously I want money to grow on trees and contractors not to charge for their work. And customers to love getting radios. That's a joke, by the way. But, I understand it's not a magical concept or process that just happens. There's tough decisions, tough conversations, which we're doing now. But these seem disproportionate.
A little in weeds for a 5-year program. But you also understand, we are starting a new business from the ground up. So there are always going to be those awkward years of it to get a foothold and to grow from there. I think we're well on our way at that foothold. We have a very good foothold. And fortunately, for where the sites that we chose for that sewer plant, I think we'll have less expenses than some other entities around us because most of that service area that we are trying to serve with that sewer plant is gravity fed. It's not lift stations, it's not force mains, which is force mains and more mains. So the benefit of Green Valley, most of that service area that we've looked at and reviewed for many years, like I said, is going to be gravity fed, which is less expensive practices. And hopefully less maintenance. With a good maintenance program, we're going to have new systems with easy maintenance right now. But as we have a maintenance program, we're keeping those lines clean and let the end gravity flow to us is very important. We're well on our way.
Moving on to the next slide, slide 7 is where we're at on wastewater. Again, as I said before, this is heavily driven by that allocation factor, 61%, 39%. We go in and say, allocate costs based on customer, allocate operating costs 3% for wastewater, this chart looks completely different. So again, we don't put a lot of stock in this right now because of where we are in our wastewater business. We are a growing business, we're a startup, as Pat said. But again, you have to see the numbers. These are the numbers based on our allocation factor. As I said before on slide 8, we look at Green Valley in total. Because that's how you issue your debt. That is how the rating agencies are going to look at you. They're going to look at you in total as a combined utility. They're going to look at your books of records in total. So that's where this slide comes in. We're looking at overall revenue efficiency, revenues versus expenses. We're looking at debt service. And we pay our debt, we still have a little bit of margin there because we want that margin. What is going to happen to our reserves? If we implemented this capital plan but did nothing with rates, that would require you to draw down on reserves. And that's what you see in the upper right-hand corner. We see that reserve balance falling if we don't adjust rates at the same time as we execute. The next slide, slide 9, this is a new slide I added. Hopefully this is helpful to you as you set policies specific to water and wastewater. So if you were to go in and adjust the fixed charge on water by $1, that would generate $221,000 a year. If you adjust your wastewater charge today by $1, that would generate less than $10,000 a year. That is the discrepancy you have in your customer base right now. On the volumetric side, 10 cents, 10 cents. If you go up 10 cents on the volumetric water rate, that generates $204,000. If you go up 10 cents on your wastewater rate, it generates slightly over $10,000. Again, demonstrating magnitude here, as we look at this.
And then to this note, if we go up $1, for example, on the chopping side, $1 of water to generate 220,000. If we go up $1 on wastewater to generate less than 10, that's how we pay for that. It's 39% labor that's billed against the wastewater side. We're on a 10,000 increase versus.
So if you go up 1% on wastewater, you take fixed to variable charge, well, 1%, that's going to generate $6,500. If you generate $6,500 more on your wastewater utility, it impacts your water customers 3 cents per customer. That's the impact. It doesn't even show up on the variable side. When you divide by the volumes, it's less than a penny when you look at it. So the reason I put this in here, you just got to be cognizant as you look at trying to balance water and wastewater. Making changes on wastewater right now to generate significant revenue to have any kind of an influence on your business, it has to be very significant.
Real quick, you said less than a penny. Right?
Yes, less than a penny impact on your water bill. So if you go up 1% on the wastewater side, it's going to save your water customers less than a penny per thousand. So there is effectively no savings there. Very slight, but there's no measurable savings to your water. Again, this is just the fact because we're starting a business. This is where we are. This will change over time. This dynamic will change. And so as you're making policy decisions, because that's what rates are. Rates are a policy decision. You are setting policy. As you make those policy decisions and you try and balance your water side with your wastewater side, these are the decisions you have to make. Is that helpful? On slide 10, again, this is a slide you've seen before. You got two options that we're presenting to you this year. 2022, you can see what our projection was at that time. We were at 5.5% in 23 and 24, 3% in 25, 26, 27. This is the water increase. Where we're at now, again, as I said before, we've not had an increase in 23. So coming into 24, we could do, based on our numbers right now, based on our assumptions, we could go 5.5% on the water side and be fine. Our projection going forward is you have to go higher. But again, recommend you look at this every year, those numbers will change. Alternatively, if you wanted to be slightly more aggressive on the rate increase in 24, go to 7.5% and level out those future years. It effectively comes down to what do you want to do in 24 and how is that going to impact those future years? Knowing that those variables will also change in the future. They can go up, they can go down. You have wholesale water providers. They're going to make decisions. They're making plans. They're investing in infrastructure. That changes this. That is effectively outside of your control. As you go forward, they have operating cost increases as well. So there's some options here for you. There are myriads of options between these two, should you choose to select. My recommendation would be not to go below 5.5%, setting yourself up better in the future. But it's up to you as a board to set the policy and where you want to go.
Now, on this slide, I do have a couple questions. So there some clarification on these footnotes.
Yes, sir.
So footnote 1, these increases do not impact the AW Texas rate. What is the AW Texas rate compared to everyone else's rate? Is it higher or lower than that? I got your email, Pat, that said it's different based on a contractual, but it didn't say what it was.
When AW Texas came to town, we calculated a rate, industrial rate, which is something that we had not had in the past. And so it was a calculated amount based on their projected usage, both on water and wastewater. And of course, that was not part of the study because in our contractual agreement with AW Texas is that there's a different style of notification and calculation we have to do because of this, a special industrial rate. And And so it was not part of this study. So that would have to be addressed at a different time.
Why can't that be addressed?
Because of the kind of
It's different combinations, contractual, contractual.
Yeah, I think it was based on amount of consumption, we'll say reach another tier, because we knew their initial startup was one manufacturing site. As they expand to that second phase, and third and fourth phase, we built that contract opportunity for us to readdress that rate and notification of increase both on water and sewer. And so it's a different type of customer than what our normal customer base is.
Because I know as far as the $45 million plant expansion estimate, the customer is AW. And I know they announced recently their second phase, which we will need more capacity in the treatment plant for. But if we raise rates, it's not going to apply to that rate.
This particular rate increase will not apply to that because because of our contract agreement with their phase development of AW Texas. As their consumption increases, so will our rates, but we calculate it at a different type of calculation that we have in this agreement. So the expansion of the plant is not geared toward what AW Texas is doing, which is what we have contracted up for subdivisions and other things that we have coming in the next several years. As we review the consumption or the usage of AW Texas both on water and sewer, then there's be a trigger point where we go in and recalculate their usage. Okay, and we knock on their door and say, okay, AW Texas, you are now using this tier of water and sewer. And so now we recalculate that and change that rate at that time.
So you contractually locked in on the rate of that one customer.
On their first phase, and it was off projections, and we monitored that monthly.
Is that in perpetuity? Is that correct?
No, you could increase annually, it would just be a contract.
Well, if we're increasing on all the other customers, I think it's worth the effort to go through the increase on.
Yeah, the main reason we did that one under an agreement instead of just setting a basic industrial rate is whenever we were negotiating a contract with them, they couldn't tell us what their actual default was going to be. So we left their ability in there that we could surcharge them if they made us pay water come to the plant or a quality that doesn't meet our residential. So it was in bring out the benefit to leave that kind of open-ended where we can go back and say, oh, you said you were going to send us this, but you're sending us that. So,
And I don't know the details, I'm trying to find the details, I can't spit out, specific contract numbers, I'd like to know what it was, what it is at some point. But in general, if we're raising rates on everybody, we should raise rates on everybody, even if we have to take two different processes.
another way to think of this is you could, I agree that AW Texas rate needs to be increased, and we can do that on an annual basis. It's similar to the MDU wholesale. That's negotiated, it would become another year and a year. We just did a rate increase with them off this cycle.
I think that was actually effective July 1st, I believe. So that rate increase in MBU for that wholesale agreement wouldn't affect us.
And their contract is about to expire, so they're going to be coming in and renegotiating that.
And so Steve doesn't realize you're talking too much. Footnote 2, the same thing, wholesale versus commercial rate. I was going to say, what are those differences? For whenever we're actually voting on this, let's get us that data beforehand so we can understand when we're.
I think what we need to do is, first of all, I think in that first, in the contract agreement with AW Texas, there was a tier level that they have to surpass before that rate increase became effective. I don't think they've reached that, both on wastewater or water consumption. So this rate increase will be separate from that. That will be dealt with at a different time, and a different notice and notification to them once they reach that tier, because they're locked into that amount of water and wastewater, and they have not reached that.
And I know you can't say what those numbers are. We want to know, or at least I want to know.
Let me bring that information to you. However, we can't hold up this decision with that because it's a different animal altogether. It's a different negotiation and contract agreement that we signed 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever. We'll have a report to y'all regarding that. That's totally separate from this. And we'll also include new gens and review that rate as well, which I think is important.
And one last question on this slide. We say earlier that in 22, in winter of 22, we did a rate increase on slide 3. And so we did a rate increase in the winter of 22, but we're not proposing anything for 23. But the plan in 22 included a 5.5% rate increase projection in 23. So why are we skipping that with the plan we looked at previously? Said there was more moderate increases. Well, I'm sure no one's going to complain about a 0% increase this year. I agree with you that we should do more frequent, smaller increases versus more dramatic increases.
I can kind of talk to that, don't mind, Chris. One of the reasons why we're doing this now and why we missed the years because we got off kilter with our fiscal year budget. Due to Snowmageddon, COVID, a lot of things have changed in the last several years. So this board chose not to do a rate increase back in the COVID years because there were a lot of folks without jobs or not working. And so we didn't want to hit our customers with that rate increase. So we paused. But what that did is also made us not on calendar month with our fiscal year. And so why we did this rate analysis now to get prepared for our fiscal year budget in October 1 is why we kind of offset that time period.
August of every year is when we need to have this report.
All right, so we'll probably start that prior to that, so we can July, August, September is our budget months, maybe August and September, but so we can be prepared and make the choice. Do we need to do this or not? Or we kick it another year or we don't? What we're trying to do is come back into alignment. There you go. Thank you. I could think of that word with our fiscal year budget. That way we get the benefit of the full fiscal year of that increase or whatever that number is. And we're not trying 6 months of your fiscal year, you do a rate increase. It changes those numbers and it changes your budget as well. So that's why we're doing this now.
Slide 11, that is the projected sewer. Again, it's our recommendation you stay with your plan at 3%. That is your policy. You can choose where you want to go with that. It has a de minimis impact on the actual increase you're going to need overall on the water side. I'm going to move past here, slides 12 and 13. These are just charts that show that we use ultimately throughout that our plan works over time. We want to make sure that the rates we're setting are adequate. So as you can see, we moved on here to slide 14. And this just shows the numerical impact for a 5,000 gallon customer. If you saw last time, we have sample bills, 5,000, 7,500, 10,000. We can show you whatever bills you want to look at, whatever type of customer you want to look at. These are common benchmarks that are used in the industry. Municipally, when they run their annual survey, they use 5 and 10. So again, the board desires to see different numbers, let us know. With that, yeah.
I know I stated earlier, I know when I look at my bill, I'm in the 10,000 gallon range. I have kids that take 3 baths a day, and dishwashers run so much it burns up. We use a fair bit of water. There was a comment from earlier, a higher, I assume a higher use is based on the use of the pump. We have 5, 7,510. Maybe can you get a reasonable estimate for a higher usage person and maybe throw a 15,000 or what that might be in there? I'm sure that's easy to do.
What I'd like to do is provide the board with a spreadsheet or
I'm not trying to make a whole bunch of work, but I'm trying to.
no, we can do this fairly easy. What we'll provide to you is based on your tiers, what this rate increase will do to you at 5,000, 10,000, or 6,500, or what. Most of the time that we've done a rate increase for the customer service reps up front office, because we get the calls from the customers saying, hey, I may use 12,000 gallons a month. What does that look like for my bill? We can tell them that. So we'll provide a spreadsheet that shows that increment amount per 1,000 gallons.
So slide 14, 15, 16 are all combined here. Again, you see the impacts of option 1 and 2. We break that down to show the actual increase in the water versus the wastewater bill and the total bill there on slide 15. So slide 15 is option 1. Slide 16 is option 2. And again, that's just providing you the impact of those two different options. Slides 17, 18, and 19, we move on to slide 17, that's the 7,500 gallon impact. Again, option 1, option 2, not a big difference there in 24, 528 versus 640 in total. Option 18 breaks that down. Excuse me, slide 18 breaks down option 1 between water and wastewater. Provides you details there. Slide 19 provides you the same information for option 2, the breakdown of water and wastewater. Slides 20, 21, and 22, the 10,000 gallon bill, same type of setup. You can see the option 1, option 2 there. Option 1, 650 a month. Option 2, 787 a month. But then we've also broken that down. Slide 21 is option 1 between water and wastewater. And then slide 22 is options.
And these numbers moving from 23 to 24 to 25, those are escalating on top of each other every month.
The next slide is another slide we've added, slide 23. We've seen the regional bill comparison. We'll get to that here in just a second, but there was some talk last time about how do these entities compare to one another. Unfortunately, I can't provide you all of that information. I don't work for all of these entities. I do work for some. So it's hard for me to go in and speak to what is comparable and what is not comparable. But one place to start is who is their water provider? Where do they get water supply? And in visiting with Pat and Gary, where they pointed out you have multiple water supplies. You take the GBRA, you have Canyon, you have Alliance, you have Hamilton. To me, that puts you in a much better position than some of these other entities, because you have more options. That positions you well into the future. And again, if anybody has edits to this, if you've got better information than we do, let me know. This is based on publicly available data, so if you have changes, please let us know.
Well, I know I saw at the CRWA meeting the report from the Alliance, the Alliance is going to pump CRWA, that's how it's going to get to us. Right. They made a comment that I'm here to inquire about my next board meeting of $46 million of additional costs. I mean, I think it was a phase 1B project. I don't know.
Is that Wells Ranch phase 2? 3?
The Alliance.
The Alliance project.
Of 1B. And then we also have Wells Ranch phase 3 that we're talking about. So we're not there. We have other increases we have to consider.
Absolutely. And again, that's, if you think about it, if you don't pass those cost increases through, it reduces what you have to manage your internal interest. I always recommend that you look at wholesale water expenses, cost of goods sold. Just like if you were selling eggs or milk, if the cost of livestock goes up, you're going to pass that through because that increases your price. So it's the same thing. You've got to look at your cost of goods sold. In my opinion, you've got to pass through those wholesale increases as much as possible. Yes, sir.
Real quick, the four entities, have they, or the numbers that you calculated, is that an estimate of what they are going to go up on, or is that what they finally determine for their board, for their budget year for FY24?
So if you go on to slide 24, which I believe is what you're speaking to, this presents your current and future rate with everybody's rate as of today. So this is before their increase. I know I received some information that there's some others going up. There's one forecasted to go up 3%. I think that was the best one we had, but I think you're going to see probably 3 to 5% within the region. But yeah, the other cities, the other entities, the other districts on this is before they have an increase. If we rerun this in October or January, it's going to look different. Because those cities, those entities, those districts are going to start to shift around. We also, to the best of our ability, when we're looking at this chart, again, this is 5,000 gallons of water, what you're looking at here. I think we're in fall in that comparison. To the extent possible, we have included the other fees. Pat spoke to this earlier. You've got some of the entities on here that charge a monthly water acquisition fee, or they have another type of monthly capital fee. We've tried to include that as best as we can on here. There's a slide towards the end of the presentation that kind of outlines some of those items. But we've tried to make this as apples to apples as possible. Not always possible. Again, we're beholden to public data, we're beholden to our understanding of what they're doing on their rate schedule. I was actually working with one of my analysts today, and the published rate was clearly wrong. But that's the publicly available data. That's what's there. So you have to be careful when you're looking at this. It is not apples to apples. It's apples and oranges. We do the best we can with the data.
Do we have any known deviations like that in our?
There's no deviations that I'm aware of.
So on this, I'm going to use Cibolo as an example, because that's where I'm, that's $54.10. Is that including the $6 fee that Cibolo charges per month?
Yes, sir.
It is included.
Included in that. That's one that we did pick up. Which I believe that means actually about.
It is. Anyway, I think it was 70.
Yes. Slide 25 is 5,000 gallons of sewage. So again, breaking out water, breaking out sewage separately to see what that comparison looks like. And then we've done the same thing where we put them together. We combine them there, slide 26, combining water and wastewater. Again, not all entities provide sewage service, so there's only the blue bar that do not provide sewage service here. We'll only see the water amount. And we have these similar charts for 7,500 as well as 10,000 gallons. So slide 27 is 7,500 gallons of water. 28 is 7,500 gallons of sewage. And then, of course, we combine those there on slide 29. Slides 30, 31, 32, same type of setup. 30 is water. 31 is the super side of that. Again, 10,000 gallons of sewage, that's a lot of sewage. Slide 32, that's the combined. So again, as I've said before, you're setting policy when you're dealing with rates. Ultimately, it's up to this board how you move towards that. If there's other information you can provide, we're happy to do that. I understand nobody likes a rate increase. My job, I travel all over the state and nation talking about rate increases. So I understand that this is difficult, but my job is to support you in this decision. So please let me know what information you need and what we can do to assist with the process.
Okay, so I had kind of back at the top of the slide. The MHI, the CPI utility service increased from before. So on the table, the chart was listed as water and sewer CPI. In your presentation, you said it's water, sewer, and trash.
There's actually a trash. We call it, we refer to it as water and CPI, but it's water, sewer, and trash. It's utility service CPI.
And then, so water, sewer, and trash is about 4%.
Yes,
I think
on one end.
you mentioned, I asked a question about last time we spoke, and we said that's the figure. So water, sewer, and trash. Let's see, you also made a statement if you plan well, you can do every other year, rate increase, the thing be larger, the more frequent would be small. So in my mind, larger, I would say is larger than 4.2, and then the smaller is smaller.
Well, the 4.2 here is the average. So that is what you were looking at is the average annual change rate. I don't know, and it depends on your business, it could be less than 4%. But right now, that's what the average is running, is 4% every year.
4.2.
4.2% every year.
We might get down to percentage points to try to save what we can, whatever we're going to do. 4.2. Look through, see if I didn't ask anything. Oh, on the McQueen water rate, does everyone understand the McQueen water rate? How we acquire McQueen and how it was too low? Pat, would you explain the McQueen rate, please? How we acquired that area?
Yeah, McQueen was an investor-owned entity within our CCN. Not particular year, but several years ago, we purchased that system from the owner, and they were at a very low rate. Since then, we've made a few improvements out there, but we started their rate increase incrementally because we didn't want to hit them right between the eyes with a 10 or 15% rate increases. So over the last several years, we've gone up a few percentage points per year. It's probably 250 units, 245, 250, something like that. I had lost count. But it's an area that we've changed out meters. It was a high manganese in their water area, so we had some infrastructure we had to replace out there because of the water quality they had prior to us taking it over. And so since then, we put them on our current water plan, our infrastructure. That was just surrounded pretty much. So it was pretty easy to fix, but over the last several years, we kind of upgraded their rates over there. So I think, Pam, I don't know where we are with them. I don't need to call you out here, but I think this year we'll get them up to speed with all the other customers that are serviced.
The last study, 23 was supposed to get them back to.
Yes,
one.
yes, I think we'll all be, so it's another 245 to 250 customers that'll be at the same rate as everybody else within our service area. We also have better quality waters.
Last question I have right now is, if we were to try to reduce expenses, and I don't know if you can give us a figure, but if we're trying to reduce expenses to get our needed increase closer to the average, I understand we have to do it, we have to do something, we can't raise the rate at all, as much as I want. But if we were to try to get the proposed either 5.5 or 7.5 down closer to 4.2, what dollar amounts off of what we spend in our expensive annual based on history would get us 1% extra when we can drop down, or 0.5% extra? We can't put it all in customers. In the past, we could more. I think we could have cut. Pass the tax. We can talk about today. What we cut $500,000 to get 1% down off of what the projected rate increase would be. Would we have a couple $1 million to get 1% down? Like, give me some level of understanding what we would have to do to get closer to that 4.2%.
Unfortunately, I don't have that number right now. Yeah, I can go back and develop that. I can give you some.
And I'd love to be able to spit out what our budget is, but I have to look at my numbers. I'm not going to ask that. He'll say wrong, 5.7, I'll afford to. But yeah, that would be helpful. Just, I know we make you do much more, but this is important. Okay.
And I'm not a proponent of rate increases. I don't like it any more before anybody else does. But when we're talking national average, it's not apples to apples.
I was actually about to just say that.
Because we get a 10 to 15% increase from CRWA. We get a 6% increase from our raw water costs from GURA every year. And so that national average doesn't take that in. But we don't want that national average is what they're looking at to say this is. The national average is looking at everybody's rate increases and saying, well, this is the average. Doesn't look at, you have to go into the weeds more to determine what your rate increases would be able to supply a service.
You had quoted a higher rate for a growing district. It's in my other from previous, so I need to go pick up that number. That's what I'm trying to get closer to the average of a growing district.
Well, and that's the issue that comes to capital. Really what it comes to, as you are growing, as you're adding capital, I compare it to a wave. So I have districts, I have cities that I work with that experience these waves. We get a lot of people that are about to come in, but in order to support that growth, you have to make a significant amount of capital investment before the wave can break. So those ratepayers can come in and pay for it. And so it's almost, I compare it maybe a little bit to a horse race. Horse gets way out front, and over time, the other horses kind of catch up. And that's how this tends to work with growing communities, because you do have to put in the infrastructure to get people to pay for the infrastructure. That's the challenge.
Right, and we've got to keep staff, we've got to keep staff paid right, because I understand they will go somewhere else for a quarter if they can go that. So we have to, make sure we have what we need, we have to have trucks, tools, everything. We have to build plants, but then we also have to make sure we're not completely dependent on people that are funding this, because we'll all get funded. And then someone else will come in and say, stop. And so we have to do all that balance. So I need to understand, we need to hold our budget firm, no increase in expenses, we find a way to cut somehow, we will reduce or what, so. For the next week, that would be an engagement.
The point to consider, Mr. Chairman, is if we don't do these increases right now, this year or next year, it'll not only cost the district more later on because our capital won't be there.
Well, I agree, we have to increase it some.
Yes. And then if we don't increase it, it's gonna cost us a lot more, and then it's gonna cost our ratepayers a lot. And so it's better to do it in increments now than to put it off. Every 2 years seems outrageous. You're asking for trouble. But you just can't predict what's gonna happen 2 years out.
If you're gonna do that, you've got, yeah,
And we're doing a great job of planning, but even the planning sometimes just doesn't, it's there.
Planning is all about timing, and what Chris mentioned about the waves that the city see, we see that same way. And it comes down to the obligation that you have to serve that service area. When you see that wave coming, when you have obligations, it's just like from 3,000 connections to 17,000 connections. That wave is coming from all those years of being proactive in planning and being able to meet that obligation. And so that obligation comes with a cost. And then that's when those rate increases comes, and you spread it amongst your entire service area. You have to pay for what you have now, but we also know we have a way coming. There again, I mentioned again what I said a while ago about this board many years ago decided to make growth pay for growth. And that's why we developed the impact fee, the water acquisition fee, the kayak fee, because those are our revenues. We don't have permit fees, we don't have a street fund or I don't know, other types of fees that other cities have around us. A special utility district like Green Valley has a certain level, a certain number of ways to bring in revenues. And so I think we've done a good job on controlling that. And because of that obligation to serve and the growth that we've had thrown at our feet. So as we move forward and we plan, we always try to keep a pretty tight line on our budgets. But those budgets, like Nick said, represent employees, vehicles, equipment, supplies, materials. All of that is constantly rising, as well as the raw water costs from the CRWA, the chemical costs, the GBRA costs, the raw water that we take from the rivers and streams and stuff to be able to provide service, and groundwater costs. Those leases to the groundwater lines are always increasing. So all of that, looking at all of that, 4.5 to 5 or 5.5% rate increase per year is not bad. When the rate increases that we're having to handle are usually above that. So we hold that in, hold it in check by doing 5.5%, or maybe a 7. But one reason why that 7 and 8% is there now is because we didn't take action 2 years ago. So we got to keep that in mind.
How much more expensive is a meter now than it was 2 years ago?
What's that?
A meter, 1 meter, how much more expensive now?
Meters?
Yeah.
if you go.
Yeah, let's assume we can get it.
2 months ago, I got a rate increase on our cost per meter from the vendor
It went up $35
$45 per meter.
per meter.
I'm trying to put it in perspective, because we're gonna have a rate increase. No, that's it.
If you remember this last year, we fought very heavily into the meter supply, because first off, they were getting very hard to get. We had obligations, we were running out of meters, and so we bought quite a few. We purchased that at our own cost. If I were to purchase those same meters today, we'd probably pay another $50,000 to $100,000 for that same number of meters. So we purchased at the right time.
Well, to your point too, you brought it up in the board meeting, where you make the agreement with a developer, oh, okay, you're gonna pay for an 18-inch line to service your area. In light of that, well, he's paying for the 18, but you're gonna go ahead and put a 24 in there, because you're gonna need the expansion later.
Well, that's what those impact fees are paid. Right. Instead of getting 10-year on their impact fees, we collect impact fees every time we send a meter. Well, we have to use those impact fees to help build that infrastructure, and it takes it off the ratepayers, but it helps that development. When they come in, they're paying for that upsize through the impact fees that we have collected prior to them. And as they move in and grow, then we collect those impact fees and help move that on down the road.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I was crunching numbers, that's why I was on my phone. I was crunching numbers because I had to find out, because our water bill, my wife usually has it on auto pay. So I haven't actually been looking at it. However, she decided to look at it this month, and I was like, I didn't want to. And because I fixed my irrigation system, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna water my grass, it's gonna be awesome. My grass was really green and it looked really pretty, and I'm sure many people were happy. However, my use over the last 3 months was approximately 16,000 gallons of water. That's a lot of water. And so I looked at my bill, and my bill was approximately $123. So I was running numbers. So if we do a 5.5%, I'm looking at an increase of $6.76 on my water. And I use 16,000 gallons. If we do 5%, it's $6.15 approximately on my bill. And then, because I live in Cibla, I have to pay Cibla sewer and I pay PDSUD water. Arguably, if you're on the same system, your rates would be a little bit lower than having two separate entities. But that aside, Cibla has a 5% increase coming up, and they're also increasing their $6 a month to $7.50 a month. So you have to add the $1.50 into that 5%, which actually turns out to be a 6.2%. So our number right now is below Cibla, is below most of the areas around here. I don't like, and I don't think anybody in this board likes seeing that next digit, that 8%. But again, that's next year. Everything can change. It might not. I don't think it should ever have to go above 5%. In our HOA, we had gone 3 and 4 years without increasing our rates, but finally inflation just caught up with us, and we had to have a 7% increase. It's inevitable. And I will probably take some of the heat. Pat was probably protecting me from that, but I'll take some of the heat. We did not have to pay, we did not have a rate increase last year. And I would like to think that I was part of that because I was yelling tooth and nail because I was like, hey, let's kind of tone it back, but I didn't really dive into the budget. I didn't really dive into everything that is here. But across the board, we're seeing increases of 15% for stuff, $35 for a water meter. Pipe is expensive if we can get it. Fortunately, Pat has been a good steward, and he has bulk ordered. And he says, I just ordered 1,000 meters. Well, we have to put it. But he effectively saved us $100,000 if we would have to order it right now. And that's good on this part. Kudos for him. But that's basically what I'm saying is nobody wants a rate increase. Nobody does. The current inflation rate is almost 9%, and we're still below that, even if we go at the higher end of 5.5%. I think we're going to have some discussion a little bit about that. But I think that's my soapbox. And our core water, I think Pat might have touched on that, but our core water purchase across the board is fine.
Yes.
Like just our water acquisition, just us getting water to be able to give to the customers has jumped by almost magnitudes. And there's really, right now, there's no alleviation in sight, unless inflation's got to come down. The cost of materials across the board has to come down. I mean, my house went up in value $200,000 within 2 years. And you can't tell me my house is really worth that much. It's just because the cost of materials and the cost of doing things has just gotten that much. So, I think none of us.
The 9%, is that based on the Social Security Administration rate, or where are you getting that?
The 9% on the latest inflation rate, that was the last inflation, the last report last month was 9%. That's not core inflation, that was overall inflation. So that had, energy and food prices in it as well. So that had housing, it had everything. It did come down this last month. Core inflation, as I recall, was still running at 5%. Is the core inflation. That's when you take out housing, meal, housing, food, and energy. Needs. Right. I understood. I'm not making any political commentaries on that. People say, oh, the inflation 1% is great. Well, if you take out driving to work, having, living, okay. That's definitely. Personally, my commentary, I still think we're going to see interest rates go up. I think they have to. It's just not working.
So real quick on, this is residential, I saw a lot of that, but I didn't see any ag, formulations or tabulations as to, the bigger consumers. So what are we doing with that? Is the same situation, price of residential and it's still into that category as well?
Most of our system is residential. We have a handful of, we have commercial rates, but we have very few industrial.
As far as that,
Yeah, we've done the same percentage increase on those folks as well.
I know they're in a different bracket, correct?
Their tiers are different, but their base rate and their adjustments will be the same as these. We only have one wholesale customer, 2 wholesale customers now. And we've already gone up on the limit, so which is in effective July 1st.
We don't penalize for use. Like, for me, I didn't notice anything different with me hitting 16,000. I'm not in a different tier of billing. Correct, we have one flat bill.
we've had to see every.
We're doing 18,000.
I'm gonna stop mowing my lawn, sorry.
Tiers for residential customers right now are 2 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 25, 25 to 50.
So congratulations.
And I did say something in the meeting before, and I didn't really expect it here, but if we use you guys next year, we probably should have a 15,000 gallon category. I think that's a little bit more realistic. I think 5,000 is just kind of silly. 5,000 is probably something, or,
I use 5,600 gallons last year.
616.
yeah, but yeah, definitely, we can do the 15,000 bracket. I don't necessarily think we have to go to 2015 on here, so I'm not madly doing math.
Any questions, directors?
I have a statement. I don't know if the public realizes that every single person on this board also pays Green Valley Water. We have water. So if we decide to raise the rates, we also raise the rates on us. We have to pay higher bills. And we don't take that decision very lightly. So this is something that we really talk about, discuss, and so.
I've got, I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but under option 1, it appears that our fund balance reserve still doesn't hit our target. Is this going to negatively impact our bond debt rating if we don't hit that target?
What page?
I'm sorry, it's page 12.
Yeah.
So we are building back in reserve. You're right. neither option, option one or option two, do not get you immediately back to your reserve target of 120 days.
Yeah, but in 25, it's still different.
Yes, sir. 25 is still different. We're trying to build back into reserves over time. Our concern was about affordability, it was about the overall level of the increase. And so we tried to phase this in. Will that impact the bond rating? My hope is no, because you can demonstrate to the bond rating agencies, here's our plan, here's what we're looking at, here's what we're trying to do. The other element there is debt service coverage. They're not just looking at reserves, they're also looking at debt service coverage. What is the margin we have over and above your debt payment? So it's a combination of those things. Unfortunately, the rating agencies don't come in and tell us it's this number and this number and this number. They're a little cagey about it, frankly, and they won't let you pin them down. But our point in it is to demonstrate you have a plan of action, you're looking forward, you're looking out. And that is what the agencies hopefully will really look at. Might they deem you for your fund balance reserve being down? Potentially. I'm not gonna say they won't. But again, that's the goal of looking at this every year. That's the goal of having a plan and looking out into the future.
For the last 3 years, I've been on the ratings call with Pat for Green Valley. And the thing that the rating agencies ask are, when was your last rate increase and when will we next? So, as Chris just said, as long as you have a plan that you may not be hitting the target today, but as long as you have a plan to get to the target, your rating is much better. I've been on rating calls with other that have great rates in 4 years, the rating is just because you don't have willingness to get to where you're going to be.
Did our lack of a rate increase this year impact that rate?
No, it wasn't, that, there was a little bit of discussion about, dependence on impact fees and kayak fees. There was a discussion about that, and they use the word insulation. We need to insulate you need rates to insulate you from a downturn in growth, because you're so dependent on impact fees, kayak fees, and these other pieces of the development. So I think what this rate study does is Chris and the job to move you towards some insulation to get you still want to count on because you haven't had zero over a year yet, so you're good. But you've had some down years, you've had some great up years. But you still got to make it through those bad years. Every 10 years or so, we see those. We struggled through that in 2009, 10, and 11, like the rest of it. But you make it through. And that's the thing about debt service reserves and all of that. That's what that is for. It's right in the storm and then start rebuilding. That was really what I recall from the ratings call was there was a little bit of discussion about dependency on rates that we won't, if developer wants to.
Yeah, when we look at this, we look that far back. We look at old budgets, we look at growth patterns. And even back in 29, 10, 11, we had a downturn. We were still setting 250, 300 meters a year. We've never set much less than that. And for the last 5 years, we've been doing 1,000 meters a year. So there is a big difference. But we also know that can change. And so we don't depend totally on that. We try to fit on that medium.
My concern is that our overall financial health is still solid.
Yes.
And that we're not shooting on ourselves in the foot financially at this point in time or with these changes.
Tomorrow morning, Gary and I are meeting with the staff to talk about that CIP plan, to spend some of those reserves, but spend some of those reserves with a discussion on how not to spend too many of those, and keep a certain amount of reserve left over, but knowing we have capital improvements that we need to do that is not funded by bonds or loans, to spend some of those impact fees or kayak fees to be able to enhance the system as we move forward.
So what are those other plans that are not on this Or those other projects that are not listed on this, in this description?
That's very similar to what I talked about last month board meeting on our capital improvements, where we had a very tight budget on those, and I like the plant two restoration. We spent impact fees there. I can't think of all the other projects that we did, but we have some sharp improvements that we do throughout our system that may be 1,000 linear feet of 12-inch line, or enhance the fire flow over here or over there throughout our system. We have a very vast system. We have over 500 miles of pipe. That pipe, some of that pipe is old and needs to be enhanced. And so we're always having those projects that's not funded by bonds, so we use our reserve funds throughout the year. But we're very frugal with that because we can't overspend that. But we could have, at the given year, a million and a half worth of infrastructure that we improve ourselves, either in-house or through small projects. It's not funded by loans. And that's what our meeting is for tomorrow morning, is coming for this upcoming fiscal year budget review, to have you on the list, kind of describing some of those projects, the projected cost of them.
So I know recently, almost federal had a grant for aging infrastructure. Are we applying for that grant?
As that information comes available to us, first you have to qualify for it. We have the project, all the engineering up ready for that. Yeah, we'll look into those things as well.
I mean, we internally have a data system that tracks how old these pipes are, that is on scale to be better on probably this view.
And we also collect what linear feet we add to the system each year. Becomes part of our assets.
All right, directors, any other questions, concerns? Pat, anything to add?
I think I've talked enough. Thank you.
And the intent is to have this at our next board meeting for approval. And are you looking for a commitment for year over year over year, or just a single?
I think we decided this is a multi-year thing. We don't want to project out next year because it could change.
So we're looking for 2 weeks from now to have a decision.
Or you could prove it's not.
But I spoke to Pat about before the meeting, just to clarify, was having the ability to go back and discuss this with our constituents, gain some input, and then answer any of the questions. I think you still have some remaining questions to make sure that we're fully on board with the needs of our district, and then be able to make that final decision at the next board meeting. That still falls within the timeline for implementation of legal requirements. Right?
That's correct. And also gives us time to implement that in our budget projection for next fiscal year.
President, one other comment that mine is I can see where we could put this whole thing on a line, because there's a lot of stuff in the weeds. But is there a feasibility to put something regarding option 1 and option 2 to show forward? These are the 2 options we're looking at.
Or Sam, staff. Well, that's a good question. Is there a reason that we should?
Is there any reason not to go back?
Just rest assured that when we put that out there on our website, that it is full of projections and assumptions.
Yeah.
And so it's not the finite.
Well, then I'm fine with placing Bob Robertson's name as the reference.
Exactly. All I know is 2 phone numbers.
He has a good point on that. Is there any way, I'm absolutely not opposed to putting that setting, but is there any way with these options that someone could go in and edit and like highlight 25, 26%, 28, and make it very obvious that this is a theoretical projected versus, because I don't want people to look at it and say, oh, 5 point, and it's going to be 8, because we know what's going to happen, especially online. People are going to be, oh my gosh, it's 5.5 and it's going to be 8 for the next 2 years. And if we can make sure that it's very obvious.
So we looking at a minute presentation, information there, literally says projection. So we got.
Yeah, because more information than the public is obviously. Definitely want to make sure that that is a number.
Absolutely. Just make sure we don't lose it.
Yeah, right.
We're also, we can put a disclaimer out there at the beginning, that this information, so it can be reiterated.
I would put it on the slide too.
Oh, no,
I would-
it's gonna be reiterated.
Yeah.
The slide will also be on.
On the slide, okay.
Directors, any other questions, concerns? Sir, thank you so much. Thank you. Can I tell you how much we appreciate you being here? And yes, ma'am, I apologize for not recognizing, but I know you got us back.
She's her own brain.
All right, thank you. On to item E, consideration of possible actions in executive session. We do not have executive session. We're not going into executive session. Obviously, the biggest item needs to be included on the next board meeting agenda is the approval of this rate study with the different options. Directors, any other items to be included?
Just the information. Water on nature part of the matrix, that's the calculation of, you want to go down dollar or dollars in budget. Here,
I'll defer to Mr. Sherman to pick up that
I
information.
believe they understand what that's all about. I just want to make sure, what can we do? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And then
Directors, anything else?
the other items that we discussed 2 weeks ago that weren't for today, but I know there were some vehicle, listing questions I had. I tried to. I was trying to cover for John.
And directors, remember that, our board agenda review will be Monday?
Yes.
Yeah, so please forward any concerns to us and we'll make sure that they get that.
And if we could, as we've had also in emails, considering moving the August meeting.
Oh, yes, that's one of the topics.
Beneficial of staff, if we do, when that date's going to be up for August. If y'all could,
I'll work with you on that and we'll put together an informational email and get it out.
that's not on next month's agenda, I just thought I'd mention.
Well, I think it was mentioned this evening to be discussed at the next agenda, so.
Okay. Yeah, because several of y'all had conflicts with the Thursday meeting.
Three of us did, which would lose our quorum. That was the biggest reason for this.
Well, lose y'all.
All right, any other questions, concerns? I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second. Motion seconded, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Time,
Second that?
ma'am?
Second.
Mr. Robertson, 7:15 is the time. Thank you, thank you.